you ever meet someone who has the most beautiful plan you've ever seen? Color-coded, broken into phases, and somehow none of it actually happens. They've got the spreadsheet, the timeline, the vision board. They've researched every angle, and they still haven't started. It is not laziness. That is what everyone gets wrong. These people are some of the hardest working planners you'll ever meet. Here is what most people get wrong. They think it is a defense mechanism, and then they stop thinking. Like that label explains everything. You know exactly who this is. The friend who gives you everything, but the moment you cross a line, they vanish. No drama, just gone. The person who knows exactly what they want to do has told you about it in detail and hasn't taken the first step. And here is what nobody tells you. The planning isn't the problem. The planning is the symptom. The psychology behind it starts in a place that explains everything. How they learn to be nice in the first place. Let's go back, because niceness doesn't come from nowhere, and in most cases, it didn't start as a personality trait. It started as a survival strategy. Maybe it was, that is nice, but maybe it was a look. Maybe it was silence where praise should have been. And your brain did something efficient. It made a note. Trying and failing feels terrible, so maybe just prepare a little more next time. Psychologists call this failure avoidance conditioning. In plain English, your nervous system learned the safest place is right before the starting line. A study in the Journal of Personality found people with high fear of failure aren't less motivated. They channel all of it into preparation instead, and that preparation feels productive. That is the trap. Your brain gets the same dopamine hit from organizing the plan as from doing the thing. Color-coding the folders, reorganizing the timeline, updating the spreadsheet for the third time this week. It all feels like progress. And here is what is fascinating. This isn't about focus or discipline. The planning itself becomes a form of emotional regulation. Think about what planning does. It reduces uncertainty, creates control, lets you simulate success without risking failure. Psychologists call it the illusion of productive action. Your brain can't always tell the difference between planning something and actually doing it. The map replaced the territory, and nobody noticed. And every time they open the plan instead of the blank page, there is this little wave of relief, like putting on armor before a battle that never comes. But there is a second layer, and this one's harder to talk about. Chronic planners are often protecting their identity. As long as you haven't tried, you haven't failed. As long as you haven't failed, you keep the story that you could succeed. Psychologists call this self-worth contingency on competence. Your entire sense of who you are is built on being someone with potential. And the moment you try and produce something imperfect, that identity cracks. So you plan instead. Planning keeps the potential alive. The book gets read 3 times. The paint set stays sealed, because reading about painting can't disappoint anyone. But a bad painting can. It is not cynicism. It is more like an unconscious deal. Stay in the planning phase and you never find out if you are good enough. And that deal works. For a while. The anxiety stays manageable. The self-image stays intact. Nobody can criticize what you haven't made yet. But every month in the planning phase, the gap between who you are and who you think you should be gets wider. Psychologists call it the intention-action gap. Honestly, it feels more like a slow leak in your confidence that you can't quite find. And here is the thing. There is a third piece nobody talks about. Chronic planners are often addicted to possibility. The moment you commit to one path, every other path disappears. Every other version of how this could go stops existing. Psychologists call it commitment anxiety. But the human version is simpler than that. Deciding feels like losing something you can't get back. When everything's theoretical, your project could be perfect. Your business could be the one. Your novel could be brilliant. But the second you start, reality shows up, and reality is always messier than the plan. And let's talk about something most people won't admit, because there is a childhood layer to this, and it is quieter than you'd expect. Kids who grew up in unpredictable environments, where the rules changed, where the mood shifted without warning, where stability wasn't guaranteed, those kids learn to create their own anchors. Every detail raises the bar. Every scenario you map becomes another thing that could go wrong. Psychologists call it anticipatory anxiety amplification. The more vividly you imagine doing something, the more your brain treats imagined risks as real. So your detailed plan, the one that was supposed to make you ready, actually makes you feel less ready. Every contingency becomes another reason to wait. 27 steps to launch. 14 potential problems, 8 backup plans, and the only thing missing is actually beginning. They know exactly what to do. They could recite the steps in their sleep. That is almost the cruelest part of it. They can see the finish line. They've studied the route. They've packed for the trip. They just can't make their legs move. If you recognize yourself, there is probably a voice right now saying, "Yeah, but I really do need more preparation." That voice has been saying the same thing for months, maybe years. And here is what researchers keep finding. The people who break free don't do it by making a better plan. They make a worse one. Seriously. Research on implementation intentions shows the most effective plan is one sentence. When X happens, I will do Y. That is it. Not a 12-step roadmap, one trigger, one action. Because it was never about the plan. It was about giving yourself permission to be imperfect. The first version is supposed to be terrible. That is not a bug. That is how every real thing has ever gotten made. And that permission, that is the real thing they've been planning around this entire time. Because underneath all the spreadsheets and timelines, it is a person trying to feel safe enough to be seen. That is the whole thing. Every contingency plan, every extra week of prep is really someone asking, is it safe to show the world what I've got? And it is never going to feel completely safe. That is not how vulnerability works. You don't get to feel ready first, and then be brave. You have to be brave while you are still not ready. That is not a flaw. That is the whole design. The plan was never supposed to make you feel ready. Just enough clarity to take one imperfect step. One draft that is bad. One email that is awkward. One attempt that doesn't match the spreadsheet. That is not failure. That is the beginning. Every finished thing you've ever admired started as a rough draft that somebody had the courage not to throw away. Because the person who plans everything and does nothing isn't broken. They're not lazy. They care too much about getting it right. They forgot the most important part. You have to get it wrong first. That is the process. That stack of beautiful plans on your shelf isn't evidence you are stuck. It is evidence that you cared. Maybe too much. But still, you just have to care a little less about perfect and a little more about started. So if you are sitting there with 17 tabs open and a plan that could run a small country, close the laptop for a second. Not because the plan doesn't matter, but because you already know enough. You've known enough for a while now. The next step is the terrifying, imperfect, beautiful act of doing the thing, especially if it is messy. Because the world doesn't need your perfect plan. It needs the imperfect thing you'd make if you actually let yourself try. We plan because we hope. Nothing wrong with that. Just don't let hope become a substitute for showing up. If any of this hit home, I'd genuinely appreciate it if you hit subscribe. And that join button means more than you know. Now close this video and go start that thing.